Let's talk a bit about Tony Khan. He held a call with the media on Wednesday, a very noteworthy call, and he spent the first 20 minutes of the call kind of doing a catch up on what his personal life has been like the last couple of months, and has obviously kept this information pretty quiet in terms of any kind of disclosure that his mother unfortunately went through a number of health issues, having 2 strokes. And they found a spot on her heart, and this required heart surgery back in October. And the first stroke occurred after All Out. So we go back and, at the time, describing this as probably the most difficult time of Tony Khan's professional career run, or at least of running AEW, and you compound it with what he was going through personally. I cannot imagine what these several months were like for him on both fronts. I mean, you would think that work might be a distraction, and that was obviously a very, very difficult time, both personally and professionally. So he described that it was also during this period that his mother was recovering from heart surgery, that William Regal had reached out to Mega, their chief legal officer, and essentially Regal, I guess, has a option at the end of his deal for 2023, and he was requesting that AEW not pick up the option for next year, with the request that he can go back to WWE in order to work with his son, who, was on television last night as Charlie Dempsey. So Tony Khan has, we have heard the stories of others requesting releases, and it seems like Tony Khan has pretty much put his foot down of not letting people out of their deals. But Regal called him, and Khan he had to take the call outside of the hospital where his mother was recovering. And, given what he was going through personally, he did not want to prevent someone from working with their child. And he did state that, he would not be able to accommodate these requests for many people, but stated, that William Regal will be wrapping up with the company at the end of this year. They are not going to pick up the option for 2023. And it required a lot of work on his behalf, that there was a complete overhaul, major changes in the lead up to Full Gear, and stated after the fact there was that Regal MJF segment that he thought was tremendous. And then, just adding that, this is a family first company, but did note he is not going to be able to facilitate, all of these requests if they were to come his way. So he is, later he was he was asked by David Bixenspan about whether this is a release that comes with any conditions. And this was really interesting because he stated that, based on the wording, is that he does not expect William Regal to be able to appear on screen next year for WWE, that this is essentially, he's being let out of this deal, or they're not picking up the option so that he can take a behind the scenes role, and added that, they have been extremely accommodating throughout this period. So he was very surprised when Paul Levesque put out that tweet right around War Games. I think it was the day of, and including Regal in there, and kind of felt like that was he didn't really go out and say he was insulted by it or that it threw a wrench into anything, but he certainly felt it was they had not wrapped up everything with Regal yet when that tweet went out. So this is going to bring up the obvious question of whether, in fact, we do see William Regal in any on-screen capacity or not, because this is a company, quite frankly, I feel WWE, the tweet says everything. The fact that they would put that out in this kind of delicate negotiating situation, that they put this out and kind of, are just well, if there's a situation where there's a pull apart backstage and Regal is one of the many, it's what's this line of being on television or not? It's just one that I would certainly be skeptical of WWE honoring whatever there is on their end.
Unless it's specifically put in writing that William Regal can't appear on TV. I don't know how that would even, how would they would be able to enforce that, they're not picking up the option, which means he would be completely free to do whatever he wanted with his career.
Well, it's a conditional release. So it's you are getting this release based on you are leaving for this. It kind of reminds me of when Lex Luger wanted to get out of his WCW deal and said, I'm going off I'm not going to go do wrestling and he couldn't do it for a year and then signed the WBF deal. So it was like this workaround that he could not wrestle for WWF. That was part of his release from WCW. And therefore,
is this a release though, or are they simply not picking up an option? Like what is this?
It's a conditional release. So, I mean, it's like we are great. Like they have the power.
What are the terms?
Like, it sounds like it's a year. Like Tony Khan said next year that he would not be able to appear. So it would seem that, that would be the extent of that period of time.
Okay. We'll see. I'm certainly skeptical because unless it's specifically written, I mean, this is a great coup for Triple H to be able to bring somebody directly off of a prominent AEW TV storyline onto his television show, to be able to say, we got one of those then. But I mean, of course, you have to wonder if Regal himself, knowing the extenuating circumstances that were granted, this what sounds like a real privilege for him to be able to exit his role
AEW
early.
is like, listen, AEW doesn't need to do this. I can honestly state that if I was in that position, I don't think I would be after that tweet and everything like that. It's like, I understand a father wants to work with his son, but you know what? That same company let you go and we brought you in and we have hardly misused you. I mean, if the people brought in, you could state William Regal has been front and center on every week's programming, and they picked him up when, there were very limited options for William Regal at that stage of his career a year ago. And, you're in the middle of a war. I don't know if I would be that, if I would acquiesce to that level. So I don't think the other way around that it would be necessary that we would see this reciprocated.
Yeah, but and another interesting question would be if Tony Khan hadn't made this story public, the circumstances surrounding Regal's release public, would that have maybe loosened the pressure for Paul Levesque or Triple H to use Regal? Because I think using Regal now will make Levesque look bad to the hardcore audience, the audience that's aware and the audience that has heard Tony Khan describe this move as sort of like a very, sort of sympathetic type of move that he was doing almost as a favor. For Hunter to just put him on TV after that would very clearly paint him as a bad guy in the situation, taking advantage of somebody else's goodwill. So I thought, I mean, it's very nice to see like Tony, I think, actually be so upfront with the media. And obviously, like, our thoughts are with his family as his mom makes a recovery from a very serious situation. So
who he did state that is doing better. She's at home. She's recovering. So that was just the the latest information. And absolutely, we wish our best to their family.
Yeah, but it was at least a bit of refreshing to like get some real clarity on a situation for once. That has to do with AEW rather than just having reporters and the audience, just kind of bat around with a lot of like little bits of information and trying to piece things together. Were you satisfied with this conference call?
I thought so. I thought like there was a lot of news out of this show, out of this call. I mean, addressing the Regal thing, and he wasn't even prompted. Like he wanted to get all of this out at the beginning. Like it was, and he had stated as much about that it would be addressed on the call regarding Regal. And then you had the angle tonight that seemed to be the official write-off of Regal that they did. We'll talk about that more during the show. But some other notes. Obviously, the Regal stuff was the most focused upon in the call, but he also teased that there would be some announcement regarding ROH's television future, that he was not going to answer on the call, but would talk about Saturday night, whether it's going to be a streaming deal or not. He certainly indicated like he's at least going to address it Saturday night of what is coming up for ROH in the new year, but stated that after this week, he would be focusing less on ROH on AEW programming. So for those that feel like there has been too much focus on it, like that seems like it is going to be greatly diminished after they get through this pay-per-view cycle. Brandon Thurston asked about Friday's very low number for Rampage, and Tony Khan did not deflect or try to defend what Rampage is. He said he's looking to put on strong matches. He expects a big card this week, and it's time to put all hands on deck on Friday. So, I mean, that's all you can say at this point. Like, it's a show that needs something, but now it's going to be what are those elements you do, and whether that audience is going to come back. I think they have their work cut out for them for Rampage. It's not going to be a 1 week fix. It's going to have to be something that is a pattern over time to build that show up. But for their sake, hopefully Friday was rock bottom, because I can't fathom them doing lower than a 0.08 on Friday night.
Well, their answer to it, at least in the immediate aftermath, was to put Jon Moxley versus Konosuke Takeshita on that show. It's still I would say a match that is very much catered towards the hardcores. No story, not even really a promo from Takeshita. But I mean, is that going to be enough? Is Rampage going to continue to be catered towards maybe the more diehard fan who really likes, for instance, the sound of a Takeshita match without much build to it? I definitely think having Mox on will make a difference, but will it be a significant difference? We'll see.
I thought they should have announced a promo with the Elite. Like, there was none of that. They weren't on Dynamite at all. I think just having them, even if it's a tape thing, to have them on Friday, like to have that best of 7 series, I think you need to hear from them or do something, and that puts 3 of your big stars on Rampage.
But we know what promos are like on AEW Rampage, right? Like they tend to be like video packages. Anytime they advertise,
they don't have
we
to
will
be.
Hear from. Yeah, they could be an in-ring segment. You're right. Yeah, but
now is the time that you kind of just rip out the weeds and look at how this show is being constructed, because this is not working. This is not working. There's nothing that we have to be faithful to on the format of Rampage. I think now is the time you experiment and you try different things.
It was interesting for me to hear him talk about the ROH sort of criticisms, and it's been one that's kind of been thrown out there a lot by the audience about there being too much ROH involvement, and I think specifically it's not so much too much ROH involvement because the roster is exactly the same.
It's AEW guys essentially.
It's more so, I think, the abundance of titles. And then you do have like the occasional sort of like random, ROH names from the past just kind of making appearances. Although I don't know how like detrimental really it does cloud things. And I think more so like for the audience, it really clouds like the framework of what you're actually watching. You have so many different types of like threads and title lineages to really kind of follow. It certainly clouds things and has probably in a way watered down a Rampage. Yeah.
Well, even deciphering, like one example would be the Kingdom. Like, are the Kingdom AEW? Are they Ring of Honor? It's like they came in, they've disappeared. There's no update on them. And like, there might be a very valid reason they're not around, but you don't know that. It's just, you saw this act come in. They closed a show here in Toronto, and we had, Taven get a title match, and poof, they just disappear, and they're gone and forgotten now. And they only showed up in October.
Right. Yeah. He also gave an interesting answer. Do you remember the name of the podcast that he appeared on recently? Talking.
Yeah, it was like the Battleground podcast. I
guess that is correct. Where he kind of gave an answer about that, about how, when he used to watch Nitro, and this might have been in response to like some Eric Bischoff criticism, but like when he used to watch Nitro, random names would just pop up and they would wrestle, and he thought that was great. And that's probably part of his philosophy with this, like, oh, people must recognize the Kingdom. People must, recognize like Shane Taylor Promotions. It's just throw them on TV and then we'll do the storytelling afterwards. The problem is, it's just like there's no staying power with any of these names. They make these appearances and then they disappear for a long time. You don't even get a chance to tell their stories afterwards, beyond these sort of 1 week appearances. So is it because he has so much to try to juggle at once with two different rosters? Is that part of the problem? Don't know.
Well, it's a lot of guys, and you're going to have, different, fans of performers that you want to see in certain positions, but there's so many of them that, you can make your case of a Bandito and where he is, or even Takeshita of how he's come in and he's been on dark up until, Rampage this week. like we can go down the list. There's so many, and you can't push everybody. Like not everyone is going to be a top guy. There are going to be tiers of them, but at the same time, you're looking at sort of, is this the right time then to be bringing in a certain talent that's just accumulating more talent for the war chest that we have in case of emergency. We've got a bench that is deeper than anyone's roster, but at the same time, it's, if you're a fan of one of these guys,
doesn't matter if like nobody knows who these people are.
Well, fans aren't tuning in for the depth, for the guys that are backstage or that are just being utilized once a month. If you're a fan of a guy and he comes in with a big pomp and circumstance, like a Bandito did with Jericho, and here we are several weeks later, and I would argue that this time period, the buzz factor is gone in record time. Like it's not even a 2-week window you have. It's like 7 days, and then their minds are on to the next big thing, the next big match, and whatever little momentum you have, it's fleeting.
As far as Rampage goes, like this to me, from what I recall, it's not the first time he's kind of like, talked about possibly revamping the show, and I don't think we've seen much evidence of it up until this point. So we'll see if this round is any different. The caveat, of course, over the past several months, of course, has been everything going on in the man's personal life as well as professional life with this roster. We knew he had to deal with the whole Elite Punk situation, but having this Regal situation affecting the Blackpool Combat Club as well, that he had to juggle in terms of storyline, and in addition to that, all the personal stuff he's had to deal with, maybe justifies some of the lack of quality control.
And the fact that like he's still doing the Jaguars work on top of this, like this is someone who has, like, I don't know how he carves out all this different stuff, which is why you look at the idea of, he was asked like of ROH and AEW, like he is the head of creative for both of those. And those are full-time jobs right there alone, but without running a company, without working for multiple companies. And you're looking at the idea of him talking about more content, more hours of programming, and how ROH can fit into that. You're adding a lot, and I don't care if you're the greatest booker in the world, when you're doing that many hours and it's all coming from sort of like one source, I think like you do run the risk of not just creative burnout, but you fall into like your booking preferences spread out over all of these hours and not having sort of that variety. And you can get input here and there from your other talent, but it's ultimately your vision that is being carried out, and you're extrapolating that over multiple brands, multiple programs. And I think it's healthy to have other people kind of given the reins, that an ROH that you can delegate that to another vision. Like you can maybe oversee like big picture ideas, but in terms of the week to week booking, like I just would not want to spread someone so thin when you have your prime focus on this brand, and now you're bringing in an ROH one, but one that he is very closely tied to financially, obviously.
So I believe in this call, he also talked about, revealed a little about the creative teams for the two brands, and they are different, but there's crossover.
Well, he was talking kind of about that he's the head creative for both, and that some, in regards to the coaches, like they have certain coaches that are specific to one brand that don't coach on the other, and okay. There is a lot of crossover between the two, but they also do have some distinct people working specific to one brand and not the other. So it's not just like Raw and SmackDown back in the day, where the writers were doing both shows, even if they were like designated to one. And then he just also noted about FTR, who, were victims of a lot of the changes in the booking this year through no fault of their own, mentioning CM Punk breaking his foot as one of those examples. And they have been very supportive of Tony Khan and what he has been going through of late, and they have had their own challenges. So he's very complimentary towards FTR. So it was a very informative call from Tony Khan. You had, a very real life situation that, he shared with everybody off the top. And also, addressing like the elephant in the room, which this time was William Regal. And I will add that it does feel like since Full Gear and the return of the Elite, that the focus on CM Punk has has gone down. And that's even with the Chicago reaction. And it does feel less of a pressing topic as it felt in obviously September, but extending to October and November, like right through to Full Gear. Like it does feel like there are other things that are, top of mind for people.
Doesn't seem like we're getting any sort of movement in the story. I mean, the man is injured, and it doesn't look like Tony's making any sort of significant decision until the injury is over, right? I mean, he's clearly off of TV, not on the video game cover anymore. I guess I wonder, what news there is really to pry for at this moment.
The only news will be if they come to an agreement on a release, and I feel, especially given this Regal thing, I have a bit more optimism that they may be more forthcoming and volunteer their side when it comes time, if that is an option that they go to.